Artificial body parts used to be the stuff of science fiction. Nowadays, artificial joints, at least, are routine. An artificial joint is a prosthesis that surgeons insert to replace diseased or worn-out bone and cartilage. In nearly all cases, an artificial joint relieves pain and improves the range of motion. From your knees and hips to your wrists, elbows, and shoulders, if your joints go, you can replace them. An artificial joint has both metal and plastic components. The metal acts as bone, the plastic as cartilage. This factory makes the metal parts three ways. It either casts them, forges them, or machines them. Casting is the most complex method. The first step is to pressure inject melted wax into an aluminum mold. This makes a pattern, a wax replica of the metal part. Now they build the mold for casting the part in metal. Workers fuse a group of patterns with hot wax to a holder, also made of wax. The patterns will shape the cavity in the molds. They submerge the patterns in a thick liquid ceramic, which soon hardens into a fragile shell around the wax. Then they sprinkle the shell with a mixture of two minerals, silica sand and zircon, to build up a strengthening crust. The shells now go into a furnace for about 2 hours. The intense heat hardens them and incinerates the wax inside, leaving a cavity in the pattern shape. The shells are now molds, strong enough to withstand molten metal. That metal is cobalt chrome. In this crucible, the chrome liquefies in about 10 minutes. They remove the molds from the furnace and lock them to the top of another one above the crucible. Then they flip it over. The molten metal flows from the crucible into the molds. It solidifies within 2 minutes. Then they transfer the hot molds to a cooling bin. Cold air flows around them for about 2 hours until they're finally cool enough to handle. Then workers mount each tree on an automated machine that works like a jackhammer. Each mold disintegrates, freeing the cast metal part inside. They use a saw to separate the parts from the tree, then a grinding belt to remove any unnecessary metal that hardened in the channels. Next, they laser engrave a unique serial number on each part for tracking purposes. Every part undergoes a thorough inspection. They dust the part with fluorescent powder, then rinse it off. Powder residue settles in any flaw and glows under ultraviolet light. After inspection, they buff every part until the metal's so shiny you can see a reflection. Another method for making metal parts is forging. They use a titanium alloy, which is more flexible than cobalt chrome, making it better suited for hip joints in particular. They clean the metal, then heat it in a 1200-degree furnace. This 600-ton press forms one piece at a time into a preliminary shape. Then they move it to the next die and stamp twice to refine and then finalize the shape. The last stamping on the third die trims off excess metal and adds detail. The forged part now goes into a sandblasting chamber, which cleans the metal and gives the surface a matte finish. Here's what the part looks like before sandblasting and after. Now a computer-guided milling machine smooths away the rough edge that trimming the excess metal left behind. This removes all but the last bit, so they get rid of that with a sanding belt. But sanding leaves metal residue behind, so the parts now go for a bath in a water-based citric solution. The metal surface has to be perfectly clean in order to stamp on the serial number in ink. Quite a difference before cleaning and after. Each and every metal part, whether forged or cast, goes to the quality control department. There, using digital calipers, an inspector checks all the dimensions, then examines the part under a magnifying glass. So far, we've seen two of the ways they make the metal parts of an artificial joint: casting and forging. The third method is coming right up. The metal portion of an artificial joint plays the role of bone, while the plastic portion mimics cartilage. However, the plastic isn't your run-of-the-mill plastic. It's medical-grade polyethylene, meaning it's formulated to be lightweight but also extremely durable, so that it withstands years of wear and tear within the body. The type of metal they use to make the bone portion of an artificial joint depends on how flexible that joint has to be. A knee joint requires less elasticity, so they mold it out of cobalt chrome. A hip joint, on the other hand, needs to be more bendable, so for that they use titanium. They either forge the shape in a press or mount the titanium block on a computer-guided mill. Under a steady shower of lubricant, the mill's 20-odd machining tools carve the block from all angles. After a primary rough machining, the mill's precision tools finalize the shape. From start to finish, machining just one part takes about half an hour. Now a robot takes over. It runs the part against a series of sanding belts, their grits progressing from rough to fine. This removes marks the machining tools left on the metal and polishes the surface to a mirror finish. The robot can't reach the edges, so a worker sands them manually and verifies the dimensions. Then the parts go for a thorough cleaning. The factory puts random samples through wear testing. The machines simulate joint movement, complete with fake joint fluid. The factory sprays some parts with titanium powder to help bone tissue cling to them. This machine, called an optical comparator, projects an image of the part's coded outline against a technically perfect template. The technician makes sure the part and the template match. To become an artificial joint, the metal bone now needs its plastic cartilage. That requires polyethylene powder. A technician weighs out a specific amount, puts it in the outer sleeve of a mold, then inserts the mold's inner piece. The technician loads the mold into a press that applies both pressure and heat, 190 degrees Celsius. The powder gets squeezed between the mold's two parts and turns into solid plastic. Using various instruments, they measure the molded part to ensure all its dimensions are exact. Now a computer-guided machining tool carves the grooves into which the metal part will slot. These details are far too intricate for a mold to shape. Then some final measurements to make sure the finished part adheres to the engineering specifications. Random samples undergo fatigue testing, equivalent to 10 years of wear. Some plastic parts are just too complex to be molded outright, so instead, the factory molds a block of plastic, then machines it. The block spins on a lathe as various computer-guided tools shape it. Samples of these also undergo wear testing. After a specific number of movements over a specific time period, technicians remove the parts and weigh them. By comparing to the starting weight, they can calculate how much plastic has worn off. The packaging room is what they call a clean room, meaning the air runs through a filter system to keep out dust and dirt. Workers pack the artificial joints against foam to protect the metal surface because even the tiniest scratch can cause premature wear. After heat sealing the packages, the factory ships them off to a sterilization plant. There, powerful gamma rays penetrate right through the packaging and kill off any bacteria that might be lurking inside. Make no bones about it. These joints may be artificial, but the movement they restore is as real as it gets.